Hello and welcome to our online ethical debate, Standardizing Evidence-Based Treatments and Ethical Necessity. This debate will be conducted as a formal debate. My name is Rhiannon Conlon, and I will be the moderator this evening and will also serve as the stater on the pro side. I would like to introduce the other members of the debate.
I am Mika Buenconsejo, and I will serve as the prover and attacker for the pro side of the debate.
I'm Angelica Hickey, and I will serve as the prover and attacker for the con side of the debate.
I'm Brittany White, and I'll be the stater of the con side of the debate.
Thank you. The rules of this debate will be as followed. 1, the speaker from each side will get a maximum of 5 minutes to state their points. Once the 5 minutes have passed, a timer will go off and the speaker will be asked to stop. The moderator will give a 30-second warning by holding up their hand. 2, each member of the debate must remain professional throughout the entire debate. The third rule of this debate is each claim being presented must be backed by a professional study or a BACB code of ethics. And lastly, a timer will go off when the speaker's time has ended. I would like to begin by defining evidence-based treatment according to Slocum et al. Evidence-based practice of applied behavioral analysis is a decision-making process that integrates A, the best available evidence, with B, clinical expertise, and C, client values and context. As the pro stater, I will begin by stating the main benefits of standardizing evidence-based treatments and why it is an ethical necessity. There is a significant amount of research to demonstrate the benefits of standardizing evidence-based treatments. The research supports that by standardizing evidence-based treatments, there are improvements in individual outcomes and BACB professional and ethical codes are being met.
Although well-intentioned, evidence-based practices are not entirely sound. Specifically referring to the previously referenced definition from the evidence-based practice of ABA, generalities, clinical expertise, client values, and context are considerations that lack clear rules in behavioral health and practices. Acknowledged generalities and their conclusions, which has a questionable or undefined backing in many cases, bring to question how the best available evidence prioritizes objectivity and unbiased decision-making. Generalities create a level of ambiguity that is remedied, one would assume, by the supposed clinical expertise belonging to the practitioner. Clinical expertise, the second point mentioned in the definition stated, is vague and individual. How expertise beyond the basic underlying credentials is measured and by whom opens the door to subjectivity and a lower level of effectiveness seen from the practices imposed by the therapist. Client values and context, the last point mentioned in the definition stated, can be disregarded easily, causing a potential violation of BACB's ethics codes when considering the relationship between the client's level of trust and understanding established and the practitioner's solution exercised in that situation. This reality can have a significant impact on the efficacy of the treatment plan. Potential reasons this relationship may be of concern is due to implicit bias, the presence of cultural ignorance, and a lack of awareness as to how these factors affect said client. These elements, in addition to others, can directly or indirectly and possibly unintentionally cause offense. According to an article written by Johns Hopkins University, African Americans make up 12% of the population, but only an average of 5% of the clinical trials populations in the United States. Those of Hispanic origin make up 16% of the US population, but are only averaging 1% of clinical trials populations in the US. An example of national health findings concluded by the Centers for Disease Control relates to heart health. African Americans between 18 and 49 years of age are 200% more likely to die from heart disease than other races. How can this issue receive proper addressing if clinical trial data doesn't address this demographic with statistical relevance? There's a very high correlation between clinical trial populations and healthcare outcomes.
Regarding individual outcomes, in order to be compatible with the underlying principles of ABA and to promote effective practice, the definition of evidence-based practice of ABA must include client values and context among primary contributors to professional decision-making. Bear et al. Suggested that the word applied refers to an immediate and important change in behavior that has practical value, in which that behavior analytic practice can only be termed successful if it addresses goals that are meaningful to our clients and uses procedures that are judged appropriate by our clients and produces effects that are valued by our clients. By using evidence-based practice to guide decision-making and treatment that supports the needs of our client, in turn, we will see more positive individual outcomes. Extensive behavior analytic research has documented the importance of social validity and other contextual facts in producing behavioral changes with practical value. Strain et al. Provided multiple examples of the impact of social validity considerations on outcomes and has reported that when integrating client values, preferences, and characteristics in the selection and implementation of their intervention can successfully inform decisions regarding the design and delivery of the service, as well as how to support the implementers, when to fade the support, how to identify important effects, and how to focus on future efforts. As we know, in the world of applied behavior analysis, definitions matter. A well-conceived definition can promote a better understanding and set the context for effective action. With that, according to Smith, the proposed definition of evidence-based treatment of applied behavior analysis is a decision-making process that integrates the best available evidence with clinical expertise and client values and context. Figure 1 depicts the necessary and crucial components for the production of the decision-making process for implementing the most effective treatment. The term best available evidence takes a critical and central place in the definition of evidence-based practice. This aligns with the fundamental reliance on scientific research that is one of the core tenets of ABA. The implementation of evidence-based practice is in compliance with the following Behavior Analyst Certification Board guidelines for the responsible conduct for behavior analysts. Code 1.01, Reliance on Scientific Knowledge. Behavior analysts rely on scientifically and professionally derived knowledge when making professional or scientific judgments. Using evidence-based practice is in compliance with this code by not only basing the research on the evidence, but the support the research has and generalization it has on other fields. Implementing evidence-based treatment is also in compliance with Code 2.10, Treatment Efficacy. The behavior analyst always has the responsibility to recommend scientifically supported, most effective treatment procedures. Effective treatment procedures have been validated as have both long-term and short-term benefits to clients and society. Treatment efficacy also refers to the notion that clients have a right to effective treatment that is based on research literature and adapted to the individual client.
Although there are understood and well-researched benefits to using evidence-based treatments, there are still several difficulties that are encountered while considering using them and/or during the implementation of the behavior plan. One challenge is determining how EBP could integrate into their client's home life. It's important to consider where the client comes from, their culture, and their personal and family values and beliefs. Culture and diversity is a huge discussion point within the field and can be a challenge if not handled correctly. Although certain EBPs could help improve a behavior, it may not be within their culture, personal, or family values and beliefs to follow through with that specific treatment plan. This alone may make the family hesitant to follow through with services and continue recommended practices within their home and everyday life. Instead, the client may not improve with receiving their treatment solely with a therapist in the clinic, since parents would potentially have difficulty integrating their practice due to their beliefs, as discussed by Leadbeater, and other researchers in 2018. Spring and researchers discussed the fact of even though EBPs are published and implemented, it does not always mean that the treatment will work for all individuals that it's practiced on. This could potentially violate the BACB's ethics codes 1.05, 2.09, 4.05, and 4.06 if not handled correctly. Another potential difficulty encountered deals with the inability to have required or necessary resources readily available to implement an EBP. As a therapist implementing an EBP, it is important to consider the clientele that one is working with. Without properly considering all requirements for the EBP, one may prematurely recommend a plan that is not capable of being applied properly, as discussed by Leadbeater et al. EBPs require a lot of time and commitment to correctly implement the plan as originally designed. EBPs must be implemented by a behavior analyst. The behavior analyst, as discussed by Whitney, must have the correct training, expertise, and knowledge on that specific EBP. Implementing an evidence-based practice is not easy, and correctly translating the procedures from literature without training can be difficult. EBPs tend to be very complex and require a significant amount of time for training. This leaves room for mistakes after the trainer leaves, the trainees who would be implementing the EBP. Shelton and researchers discuss how challenging this can be to the fidelity of the EBP, especially when the practice is implemented in different settings. One must also consider the long-term sustainability of the intervention. Since EBPs can be costly, is it really worth investing in it if it may not be around for long? With the continuous amount of research and publications on this, one must weigh the consequences in investing their time and energy in learning how to implement the EBP with the potential for it to be discarded later on down the road. This could violate BACB ethics codes 1.01, 1.02, 1.03, and 2.09 if not handled properly. Finally, one must consider collaborating with outside sources while implementing EBPs. Many times, therapists find collaborating with other specialists in different fields to be beneficial to all parties involved in the treatment plan. Despite the benefits of collaborating with others, it could potentially lead down a slippery slope in violating clients' rights. When not considering clients' rights, one potentially violates the compliance code and could lose their license, as discussed by Leadbeater. This could violate BACB compliance codes 2.02, 2.03, 2.05, and 6, and 3.05.
Yes, it is important to consider where the client comes from, their culture, and their personal family values and beliefs. However, client values and context is a core tenet of evidence-based practice. Behavior analysts have defined the client as the individual who is the focus of behavior change. This makes the client and their culture, beliefs, and values the sole focus of the intervention and implements the treatment in a way that best supports them and their goals. Wolf suggests that only our clients can judge the social validity of our work, in which behavior analysts address the three levels of social validity: the social significance of the goals, the social desirability of the procedures, and the social importance of the outcome. The client is the top priority when implementing treatment in accordance to the definition of evidence-based practice, focuses on the client solely. You mentioned a possible violation in code 1.01. As I stated before, the implementation of evidence-based practice is in compliance with this code on its reliance on scientific knowledge. The decision-making model uses the term best available evidence, in which the key word best implies that evidence can be varying quality and that better quality evidence is preferred over lower quality evidence. The quality of evidence involves the dimensions of relevance and certainty. Relevance recognizes that some evidence is more applicable to a particular dimension. Certainty recognizes that some evidence provides stronger support for claims that a particular intervention produced a certain result. The mandate to use the best available evidence specifies that the practitioner makes decisions based on best evidence that is available in the continuously growing field. Clinical expertise is a core component of this practice. Clinical expertise refers to the competence attained by practitioners through education, training, and experience that results in effective practice. To rebuttal your last point, numerous professions have adopted the EBP framework. So with clinical expertise as a core component, upholding standards of utmost importance. When collaborating with respected and esteemed practitioners who hold their own code of ethics, each field of discussion should be held in a manner that complies with their own ethical codes, respecting the client's rights.
In discussing the definition of EBPs, there's not one consistent definition of what constitutes an EBP. Slocum and researchers stated, we offer a definition and framework for EBPs that align with foundations of ABA, but continue to discuss that there are other definitions of evidence-based practices. If there's not one consistent definition of an EBP, what exactly counts as or is considered as evidence for these practices? Also, evidence-based practices could be restrictive, leading to violation of BACB Compliance Code 4.09, which is using least restrictive procedures. Code 4.09 states, behavior analysts review and appraise the restrictiveness of procedures and always recommend the least restrictive procedures likely to be effective. Also, by fading out support of an EBP, it could potentially and has led to the incorrect implementation of the evidence-based practice, as discussed by Spring and researchers. This could lead to the EBP not being effective for the client. When discussing Smith's definition of evidence-based treatments, it states the need for clinical expertise, evidence, and the integration of client values when in a decision-making process. Talking about clinical expertise, many times behavior analysts are not trained on several to all of the evidence-based treatments available. Often, behavior analysts can get pressured into practicing evidence-based treatments that they are unfamiliar with, as mentioned by Bailey and Birch. This directly violates BACB Compliance Code 1.02, which states, all behavior analysts provide services, teach, and conduct research only within the boundaries of their competence, defined as being within their education, training, and supervised experience. Also, what exactly constitutes as clinical experience? If there is not one universal definition of what an EBP is, how can one clinician have expertise on an idea? Alongside that, evidence is consistently changing as new research is published and made public. This hurts the sustainability of the EBP, which causes loss of time and training in order to implement the EBP. This could also create an unwillingness to learn about evidence-based practices. I'll let researchers touch on a point that clinicians may see EBPs as useless, as it may not be worth all the time and effort to learn the practice for long-term treatment options. In considering the best available evidence, what happens when behavior analysts do not do their part in keeping up with the scientific knowledge as required by Compliance Code 1.01 and 1.03, which states behavior analysts rely on professionally derived knowledge based on science and behavior analysis when making scientific or professional judgments in human service provision or when engaging in scholarly or professional endeavors. And behavior analysts maintain knowledge of current scientific and professional information in their areas of practice and undertake ongoing efforts to maintain competence in the skills they use by reading appropriate literature. What about the long-term factor in implementing EBPs? A behavior analyst could learn or has just finished learning about a treatment and they train therapists on it. A few days later, the behavior analyst could come to find out that he was reading old information and was not up to date on scientific knowledge. Now it has wasted time, energy, resources, and has violated Code 1.01 unintentionally. The field of behavior analysis is consistently coming up with new treatments as it should. Being a newer field, this is not uncommon. Shelton and researchers state that this makes the sustainability of an EBP unpredictable and unknown. This is not feasible in considering long-term treatments using EBPs. Finally, when considering treatment efficacy, it is important to remember that EBPs are not individualized treatments. Behavior analysts must read EBPs closely and determine the best one to implement for each individual client. Even when choosing an EBP to use, it may prove not to be successful in helping that individual meet and reach their goals. Effective treatment may not be fully capable with EBPs, as treatment fidelity is very hard to reach, especially when implementing an EBP that has occurred in a different setting, such as the home to clinic or vice versa.
In conclusion, we stand by our claim that standardizing evidence-based practices in applied behavioral analysis is a necessity. This statement is backed by various studies, but ultimately the claim made by using evidence-based practices, the BACB Professional and Ethical Compliance Code for Behavioral Analysts is consistently being met and supports the importance of standardizing evidence-based practices in applied behavioral analysis as it is a necessity.
In reference to the conclusion of the prose, strict adherence to BACB's compliance code does not necessarily mean that effective evidence-based treatment is taking place. Integrity is considered, however, is treatment worthiness also within that consideration? By lacking acknowledgement of factors directly related to the effectiveness of the treatment plan in an effort to not be cited for an ethics code violation, the behavior analyst will stand to face challenges as they relate to his or her duties as an ABA therapist. The use of evidence-based treatments can ultimately cause a violation of the ethics code if applied to no avail, as evidence-based treatments have no clear and definitive definitions recognized by the very board that certifies the behavior analyst, opening the door for vagueness and subjectivity as stated above. Clinical research data consistently shows evidence of highly skewed populations, resulting in possible major outliers that can reflect trends for unrecognized demographics and inconsiderable findings, or lack thereof, that will prove certain strategies ineffective for certain groups. This will lead to evidence-based practices reflecting favorable results for some populations and a lack of results in general for any other population underrepresented. In conclusion, standardized evidence-based practices without proper and recognized rules as to what constitutes evidence-based practices is a continuation of the potential reality of a number of populations who do not benefit from applied behavior therapy, possible disregard for client values, questions surrounding possible violations in clinical expertise, as well as the inconsistencies and definitions of EBPs can result in ineffective treatment.
This concludes the debate portion of our presentation this evening. We will now go into a question and answer session. We'll start with the first question. What is the ethical responsibility of board certified behavioral analysts in terms of ensuring the use of evidence-based treatments?
The ethical responsibility of BCBAs in terms of ensuring the use of evidence-based treatments comes from the guidelines set forth by the BACB. The following codes need to be met to ensure the use of evidence-based treatments. Code 1.01, reliance on scientific knowledge. Behavior analysts rely on professionally derived knowledge based on science and behavior analysts when making scientific or professional judgments in human service provision or when engaging in scholarly or professional endeavors. Code 1.04, integrity. BCBAs must meet all components A through E in relation to integrity. Code 1.05, professional and scientific relationships. In relation to this code, 1.05, A and C should be of focus. Behavior analytic services should be provided only in a professional and scientific manner. BCBA should obtain training and/or supervision in areas where there are differences or age, gender, race, culture, religion, etc. Code 2.04, third-party involvement in services. Code 2.09, treatment intervention efficacy. All clients should receive effective treatment and the correct treatment that is needed for them. Code 7.0, behavior analysts, ethical responsibility to colleagues. Code 7.01, promoting an ethical culture.
Thank you. The next question that we will be addressing this evening is, how does a BCBA advocate for the importance of evidence-based treatments in a multidisciplinary setting where others may not agree?
The BCBA advocates for the importance of evidence-based treatments in multidisciplinary settings where others may not agree by expressing their ethical obligation of the BACB. The following codes are a clear statement and great explanation of the importance of evidence-based treatments. 1.02, 2.09, and 2.10.
Our third and final question for our question and answer session this evening is, do you have any personal experiences related to this topic you would like to share?
I personally work in a small clinic, and while we do use evidence-based practices, we are unable to use ones that require a high cost and also unable to use ones that require a high amount of training. Unfortunately, in this field, we have a lot of staff who come and go, so training on procedures that take quite a bit of time to grasp is difficult for our clinic. Also, many of our families can't afford some of the things needed for evidence-based practices, so we're unable to use that. A lot of times we have to go through local charities and agencies to help with this, but we don't always get what we need.
Thank you for sharing. This will conclude our debate this evening. Thank you for listening and participating, and have a great evening.